to the IBM CDO CTO Summit, the first in our 6-part series for 2022. I'm Tim Humphrey, a leader in the IBM Chief Data Office, and I'm excited to kick off today's session. With the disruption of the pandemic, enterprises that were slow to embrace digitization were left behind. The trend of digital transformation, adopting hybrid models, replacing face-to-face interactions, delivering a new experience for employees, customers, and partners has turned into digital reinvention. There's a new urgency to reinvent business to create advantage for the long haul, taking advantage of the technological innovation like hybrid cloud and AI, becoming even more client-centric, building vast ecosystems of co-created value across the network of business partners and suppliers, and finally, focusing on sustainability. Today, we will hear from presidents, CEOs, and data leaders who are guiding companies through unprecedented change. First, we will hear from Paul Cormier, President and CEO at Red Hat, and Inderpal Bhandari, my boss, IBM's Global Chief Data Officer. Next, we will hear from a panel of outstanding thought leaders who will share how they navigate a new normal and plan for the future, recognizing the importance of data and technology in driving business transformation. Thank you for joining. Let's get started.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Timothy, and welcome back, everyone, to the IBM CDO CTO Summit Series. This is our third consecutive year bringing you these programs online. It's another gorgeous, beautiful day here in lovely Long Beach, New York at CDO Club World headquarters. And we're excited to bring you episode 1 on leadership during challenging times, featuring not 1, not 2, but 3 president and CEO level speakers who are going to share their experience and thoughts with us, which we hope you can apply at your company. I'm delighted to welcome back to the program IBM Global Chief Data Officer Inderpal Bhandari, and to our special guest today, Paul Cormier, the President and CEO of Red Hat. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. First question is for Paul. Paul, with the disruption of the pandemic, we've seen 10 years of digitalization occur in just 1 year. In your view, what had to change from a leadership standpoint?
A lot, actually. As you've seen in other places probably too, we've probably accelerated the change with the pandemic by anywhere from 5 to 10 years from what I've seen. But I think one of the biggest things from a leadership perspective that had to change was the willingness from leadership to hire the best talent and with no regard to where their location was. So remote working. From the open source community has thrived in this model for over 25 years. So we were pretty used to it and adept at it. But I talked to a lot of CEOs, CIOs that really had to change their way of working and thinking on this, because a lot of people in the past had, if you're not in your seats in the office, you must not be being productive. And you got to build that into the culture too. I mean, it's just not a matter of working remotely, but that's part of the culture. And by that, I mean, you can't have the remote people have a less of advantage in meetings and things like that than other people that might be physically in the room. So I think that's one of the biggest things that from a leadership perspective that had to change. First, the willingness to do it. And then secondly, how to adapt your entire organization to give the people that are remote as much of a voice as those sitting in the room.
To Inderpal, they say 9 out of 10 enterprises are now accelerating digitalization and creating new businesses. Why is new businesses now becoming so urgent?
The pandemic accelerated the digitization, the transformation, mainly because the enterprises didn't have a choice. I mean, you still wanted to be client-centric, and you had to find a way to do it. You didn't have the face-to-face meetings, I think. And then to Paul's point, we realized that there also had to be employee centricity, because employees really became extremely important, because everybody was rethinking what their purpose was, what their values were, what they wanted to do with the rest of their lives, and so forth. I think in the process of doing that, a lot of the enterprises also recognized that some of these innovative technologies that had taken hold in the last few years, like hybrid cloud, like AI, and so forth, could be used to actually reinvent your entire process. So for instance, if you're working in a hybrid cloud environment, it's much easier to involve ecosystem partners than if you were purely on-prem. I think another key trend was the focus on sustainability. Again, that meant some level of reinvention. And I think when all that stuff got put together, the CEOs felt we really have to reinvent our processes. We have to also invent new businesses while we're at it, because that's where the puck is going.
And Paul, how do you see data playing a role in the rate of an enterprise's progress?
Data is everything. I mean, it's all about the data and the compute to satisfy the application, and especially highlighted in a hybrid world from, where we're moving from a CIO's perspective, we're moving from everything that might have been in their data center to things that are across multiple data centers, things are across multiple clouds for that matter. So I think the first thing that most companies need to understand is what data they have, where it's located, and what relationship to the application that they're thinking about it has. They really have to look at that from a big picture perspective out of the gate. I always say a top-down design approach is the best approach, because you really are re-architecting your entire data center that spans outside your walls now. Data has exploded so much, that the human eye alone cannot deal with data, or not even deal with it, but even take advantage of what the data can tell you. So we really need to be looking at AI as well, and how we can use AI to analyze that data to help solve the problems that we're trying to solving, whether it's within our applications or in running the business. One of the other things too is, now that we're exploding and we're going across multiple clouds now, maybe even private clouds, maybe even traditional VMs, it brings a lot of power. Hybrid brings a lot of power to the IT organization, but it also brings a lot of complexity. So automation has to play a big role here now. The mundane day-to-day tasks that need to be done, to update, to secure, to monitor, everything that now spans outside your walls can only be done reliably with automation. It's just too complex for human error to come in. Just having said this another way, all of this is not possible without that upfront understanding of your architecture and really a tops-down approach plan on how to deal with it.
Paul, how does the future look if enterprises want to remain viable to serve clients, customers, and citizens in all new ways?
I think from an enterprise standpoint, the initiatives that will take front and center, we touched on some of those, right? Essentially client engagement, client centricity, but also employee engagement, I think is very critical. So that's another one, right? Buried in that is things like customer care, business operations, IT operations, all that stuff, right? So that's the focus in terms of, that's where the use cases are going to come from. And then on the other side, exactly what you're doing to take it to the next level, that has to go back to data, prediction. Those aspects are key. Secure and risk awareness across the entire ecosystem that you're operating in. And then intelligent automation, right? It can't just be the rote stuff that's being automated now. It's also intelligent automation. So it's the infusion of AI in the key end-to-end business processes, perhaps even across the ecosystem, that's going to drive it. So that's, in my mind, that's what the future looks like as enterprises move forward with the next wave here.
What's the one piece of advice you could give to our CXOs in the audience as they look ahead and plan for the future of enterprises?
Have a plan, have a top-down plan. I mean, as I said, this is a re-architecture of your entire environment. So going in with just looking at one piece in a vacuum alone is going to get you in trouble down the road. Have an overall architecture that supports that plan, but a flexible architecture, a flexible infrastructure is really important, because one of the things we have to remember, hybrid multi-cloud is thriving now, but it's really in its early stages, and it's evolving every day, and it's going to continue to evolve. You hear, for example, a lot about the edge. That's part of the hybrid cloud now. So how does the edge fit in? But not only that, there's going to be other things down the road that are going to extend this even more. So be flexible with that. Don't paint yourself into a corner with just no ability to move outside of that. Understand what your businesses are doing, try to build to it, but also try to do it in a flexible way that lets you take advantage of advances as they come along.
Satya Nadella at Microsoft said, when the pandemic first started, we saw 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months. Last question for both of you, maybe we'll start with Paul. What significant evidence of this, digital transformation progress did you experience during these recent challenging times?
Prior to the pandemic, when you went in and talked to a CEO or a senior executive in an enterprise with regard to digital transformation, there was awareness. There was also reluctance. There wasn't, always just an acceptance of what needed to be done. Into the pandemic, maybe a few months in, we saw that change. And of course, by now, there is absolutely no reluctance at all. It's a done deal that, yes, we are going to do it. Then it's just a question of how fast, and so forth. I think the second shift, which you also alluded to, a lot of them are really talking about reinventing their entire businesses. I think a third piece of evidence, and Paul went there with the whole open source community and the way they've been doing this for the last 20 years. But to the point that you made earlier, Dave, if you look now, deviating from the enterprise end to the consumer end, because many times, the consumer end actually leads. If you look at what's happening on the consumer end, the pace of innovation and the pace with which these Web3 companies are actually gaining size, scale, and influence is unprecedented. I mean, you have companies that essentially go from nothing to unicorn in 2 to 3 years. It's just unprecedented stuff. And that, again, goes to the technological innovation that's in place.
Very exciting times and challenging times. Same question, Paul.
It's been amazing because we've all been working from home for 2 years now, but there's no question. Customers are doubling down on digital transformation efforts. Just no question about that. The pandemic, it did stall many industries, but not the software industry. A lot of our customers are using this time as an opportunity, frankly, to retool. Technologies like cloud computing and automation, they became more important than ever as really they started to retool. I think now really these technologies that really build hybrid cloud are really firmly in the category of must-have as opposed to nice to have. This is a must-have going forward. The customers need technologies that support remote work. They need to expand their digital services, scale to meet the demand, and frankly, help them to be more resilient and keep innovating. So it's really a balancing act between the speed, the efficiency, and the scale of cloud native technologies with control and granular security features of on-premise infrastructure. The CIO now has to look at what they have running all the way out in the cloud, out in the multiple clouds, and all the way out to the edge. They're still responsible for that, just as if it was inside their data center. So as I said, they want to take advantage of all the speed and efficiency of building cloud native, but they still have the responsibility of securing it, having a place for the developers to develop to it, and operating it in a secure way. So I think that's what we've learned as we've come through the last 2 or so years.
I do want to add to one of the points that Paul just touched on, which is, you're working on multi-clouds, hybrid environment, and the complexity that the CIO has to deal with now has also gone up exponentially. And that's where, you see these new concepts of data fabrics and data meshes that are beginning to take hold to simplify that, particularly data fabric, which really has to do with essentially making your data seamlessly available in appropriate ways across that kind of environment. So that's going to be the new thrust as we move forward with these technologies.
Great points, Paul. And yes, we do have an event, an IBM CDO CTO Summit coming up on Data Fabric on June 15th. Be sure to register for that one. Great points, guys. And yeah, we're at our 10-year anniversary. And we did our first CDO Summit 10 years ago at Thomson Reuters in New York in 2013. And a lot of those agenda items are things that were on the to-do list, that were on the back burner. Within the last 2 years, they were just fully implemented. So we're living in amazing times, and hats off to all the CDOs and CAOs out there who are taking their companies forward, trying to run a real-time business while they're also investigating all these new opportunities and trying to build new businesses. So thanks to both of you so much for your time today and for sharing your thoughts with our community. And now let's explore this topic more deeply with our panel of experts. Thanks again, guys. I'm delighted to welcome to the program Radha Subramanyam, the President and Chief Research and Analytics Officer at CBS Corporation, Das Gupta, who's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Saatchi & Saatchi, Katherine Bahamonde Monasebian, who's the President and General Manager for North America Commerce at Stanley Black & Decker, and batting cleanup, Scott Kohanpour, the Enterprise Head of Architecture, Data and Analytics at GE Capital. Welcome to the program, everybody. Our first question goes to Radha. As President and Chief Research and Analytics Officer at CBS Corporation, you oversee all research operations, including audience measurement, analytics, market research, program testing, and advertising research. Can you tell us how the pandemic has affected the media industry and maybe tangentially advertising as well, and how it's changed your research, data, and analytics strategy at CBS?
Such a great question, David. Thank you for it. As we're only now coming out of, or perhaps coming out of COVID, we've started to really reflect on what we have learned and what we've experienced and what we can take into the future. But let me start by flashbacking almost 2 years. So March 2020, all of us at some point had to just leave whatever was on our desks and go off home or somewhere else and then figure it out from there. And the media industry was no different, except there are some nuances that come with our business, right? Because even during that, even when people are getting sick, even when people are dying, the show must go on. We had to cover the news that day. Quite literally that day. I don't even mean in a grandiose sense, but quite literally that sense. America was counting on us to report, to inform, to connect, and to tell them what this thing was, that is the coronavirus. It was very much in the vein of that overused analogy, but except that it was changing the tires while flying the plane. So in the beginning, there was a lot of innovation, specifically in the area of news, where, whether it's from homes, basements, sat links, or somewhere else, people were figuring out how to inform and educate with all the chaos going around. And then we move on to other categories in television, sports, and entertainment. I will say that sports production is immensely complex. There are so many moving pieces in any NFL game or any tennis match or something else, but think of all of that happening with COVID protocols and people having to distance from each other and not being able to be in trucks the same way. So hats off to all our sports leadership and sports production team for how they pulled it off. And last but not least, let's talk about entertainment. People need to be entertained. People need a distraction. People need storytelling. People need that engagement in their lives. So a couple months into COVID, we were very much back in the arena making entertainment shows. But again, think of making entertainment shows which are about people and people in close proximity to each other while this disease is ravaging the nation and the world. Someday, perhaps over drinks, we can talk about intimate scenes and how those are conducted in a COVID environment. But you can just imagine the protocols, the intensity, but also the professionalism that people brought to that. So that's the media sector overall. And it was just a time of immense, I would say, camaraderie, cooperation, intensity, but ultimately success in getting the country what it's needed. So let me flip this over briefly to analytics and data and how we were impacted. So very specifically, in April, May of each year, our teams lead the company through the data pieces of the pilot testing process. What shows should be picked up, what shows should be renewed, what should come back, how they should be tweaked, and so on. And all of that had to be flipped overnight into a virtual process. Likewise, we are the ones who shepherd executive feedback and executive screenings. So we know how executives stack up. And all of that too, overnight, we had to flip to a virtual model. And all of that was honestly, we didn't think too much about it. We just were doing it because we had to keep the lights on. And when I look back, it was almost heroic what people did. Not heroic like essential workers in a classic sense, but nonetheless, we saw innovation everywhere in the media ecosystem. In data and analytics in the media sector, when we talk about currency or transaction, there had been one incumbent in place for decades, 50, 70 years or so. Many of them know them as the Nielsen Company and so on. And what we discovered is that their operational mechanics did not work in this environment. Right. And they could not adapt the way most of us media companies could to this rapidly changing environment. So we've actually emerged from the pandemic 2 years later with a ton of innovation. There are far more currency players in the marketplace today. We've been talking about this upfront as a multi-currency upfront. So what came out of trauma is also a great deal of innovation that has really propelled data and analytics in media forward.
It's incredible, isn't it? What a great summary. Thank you so much, Radha. And how do you think that the advertising industry has been affected by the pandemic or the current war in Ukraine or civil unrest? And how has it changed Saatchi & Saatchi's data and analytics strategy? Das.
Thank you, David. Great question, and also great commentary from Radha. I'll just, add another perspective to it, which is sort of in that whole supply chain, if you will, right? Because Viacom is one of our media, buys that we do every year. But The first interesting thing is I joined in the middle of the pandemic in my new role, which is April of 2020, when things had already shut down. And what I realized is that I'm not going to be meeting my office colleagues anytime soon. And over the last, I would say, close to 2 years now, I have met them maybe 5 or 6 times. So you can imagine what I've been working inside this black box, from where reaching out through Zoom or Teams and all that. So the activities in the advertising space, particularly for a company that has a media planning and buying house as well, such as us and Saatchi, they span across strategy, analytics, media, creative, production, and account management. These are the major teams, right? Now, if you think about it, the one team that cannot really hide in a room and get anything done is the production team. They have to be out there. Now, our creative teams can brainstorm in Zoom. The media team can do their planning using any tools and have conversations. Analytics is an easier choice, I would rather say, because most of the time we are working on a computer and with some programs on it and literally generating results that we can email. So we already have that infrastructure. The strategy team would prefer to have a lot of brainstorming in a room, but those virtual brainstorming sessions, became a new reality within a few weeks of this whole process. So we also had to think about our clients, because the clients are also working from home now, and something that they're not used to it is not to have the agency folks in their facility doing brainstorming with them. So without their cooperation and support, we would not have been able to do that either. So what we did was we gradually shifted to a work culture together that does not require us to be physically in the same room anymore. Some of the initial tasks were difficult. We used to have these code red rooms where you would have new products that are absolutely confidential, images of them, audio visuals of them, that no one except the team would be able to even get in that room. They would have a second key that they would need access to. All of that needed to be digitized now. Now access would be given to people who have those special permissions. So this was almost done overnight. That's how I saw the process started, with me taking over a team of 30 who I am meeting on Zoom calls and having conversations with stakeholders who are internal, trying to find time on their calendars to make sure that I ask the right questions and get the right responses. And then talking to the client on another Zoom call, giving our actionable insights based on the data and the analytics team working. Now, sometimes I watch them coding. Sometimes I get a chance to see what they're doing from a problem-solving standpoint. The part that's related to the coding, I don't have any worries about it. I got great data scientists. The part where the challenge is maximum, David, is when you are actually structuring a problem. What is the business problem we are trying to solve? We have to go through a specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound problem statement with some hypotheses that we need to come up with. We need to brainstorm those, whiteboard those, get alignment from multiple stakeholders. That was the biggest challenge that we had. And we have, gone through all sorts of experiments, like having a hovercam looking at things that I'm scribbling on a piece of paper, looking at all sorts of different alternatives on how we can collect. And the documentation part became a lot more important, because whatever meetings we have, if we don't document it right away and send it to everyone, it will be lost. So those are the kind of challenges we went through. But I think now we are almost reset to a new normal where this has become the routine for us.
And probably much more efficient.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just incredible what's happened. And I'm delighted to bring Katherine into the conversation. Katherine Bahamonde Monasebian is the President General Manager of North America Commerce for Stanley Black & Decker. What's your positioning now to lead in times of change?
Well, I think as those examples earlier show, that we're basically now, all change leaders in a world that's, perpetually in flux, and where speed and complexity are only predicted to rise. So for me specifically, this just involves sharing the vision of the future and over communicating, and probably most importantly, like being a human, since unpredictability and constant change can just be so emotionally challenging. So if you take Stanley Black & Decker, similar to the other examples, the home took on a completely new meaning during the pandemic, and we saw this surge in DIY and home improvement. And then at the same time, so that was a massive shock to a big kind of legacy manufacturer. And at the same time that was happening, employees had to not just adjust to remote work, but educating their kids and cooking and telemedicine and all of the the personal changes. And then now we have this global supply chain crisis, and we have all these geopolitical pressures, which you alluded to. So you're just taking punches left and right daily. And so I think it really just does require leaders to, to have a vision, to learn and adapt. And then, as I mentioned with the being a human, just leading with empathy and compassion.
Absolutely great points. We're going to come back to that. We'll have everybody touch on that same question. I think it's really important, but let's get Scott in the mix. As enterprise head of architecture, data, and analytics at GE Capital, how has the pandemic affected the banking and financial services sectors as a whole? And how has it changed your architecture, data, and analytics strategy at GE Capital?
So thanks for this very important question. There's a surreal moment here for me. Actually, 2 years ago, on a day like this in March, on a Wednesday, I made a decision to move a workshop on a Monday after that was supposed to be in person in Norwalk, Connecticut, with 13 or 14 people flying from all across the US and driving there, to a virtual one. When I notified everyone, they said, what? What does that even mean? I don't even have bandwidth at home, maybe in the office. And so it was very interesting that quickly the agenda, the collaboration tool, everything had to be changed. And we had interesting things happening. Somebody's cat came and started to lick the camera in the middle of the workshop, and kids were crying in the background. So we were thrown into the new reality that we have to bring home our work in a way that was unprecedented, and all the personal interactions with that goes with it. The financial industry had a collapse of its business transactions and customer base. If you look at a customer as a persona, regardless of the business model, be it entertainment or utilities or financial industry, we all strive to use data and analytics to retain the customers and attract more and upsell. This is the business that we're all in. Everything was put on hold for the financial industry. Investments were put on hold. Commercial insurance, personal insurance was put on hold. People were not buying anymore. Offices were emptying out. Travel, entertainment, restaurants, flights came to a halt, right? An important thing to point out here is not only financial industry had to maintain the operation that they had and maintain those customers and continue to provide services, they also had to look ahead, because they all had the foresight to know that COVID eventually will end, just like other pandemics. And all of these dormant business transactions that are sitting there, and I used to have, when this is over, somebody else might come and tap into it and steal it from me. And there's also an opportunity for me to go in there. So for instance, if there is a big commercial expansion in the real estate, right, but that's put on hold, for me to bid on that was possible prior to COVID because I had that relationship. But after 2 years, relationships are gone. New people are coming in, so it's ripe for the taking by my competition. So data and analytics matured from its descriptive diagnostic of what happened in the past, which we all had to do, and the predictive analytics that our data scientists did to support our strategic directives had to be thrown out and had to be restructured. And we resorted to more of prescriptive analytics, the kind of analytics that you can do what ifs. Okay, you are predicting, but what is the best way of making that prediction happen, right? So I'm predicting that in the financial industry, those companies that were, let's say, renting out office space on a temporary basis, I don't want to name any names, and then they all lost their business because everyone went virtual, but they're going to come back. The competition is going to grab it. So what if I market myself as the this and that? So predictive analytics really took a big leap ahead in my organization, certainly. Because remember, General Electric builds jet engines, aviation, build healthcare equipment and MRI machine. And we also have a huge multi-billion-dollar insurance book of business, which people may not realize it. So continue to provide the service. Transactions are dormant. Customers are sitting back, not investing more. What do I do to position myself correctly so when it comes back, I don't lose and perhaps even upsell?
Great points. Back to Radha, what leadership and corporate challenges have you had to overcome to achieve your goals?
So I think Katherine really laid the groundwork for what a lot of us are feeling. We had to fundamentally rethink and retool ourselves as leaders. Yes, we always led with vision and passion and empathy, but that takes on a whole new level when you are leading through a crisis like COVID or even the war that we are encountering today. I feel that my relationships became much more human, whether it's with my peer group or with the people on my team, because you know what? I got to see their cats and their dogs and their children. And in a way, we all got to know each other as whole people. We always talk in work about bring your whole self to work, but this kind of forced us all to bring our whole self to work. And I think that will profoundly change our relationships and deepen our connections as we go back. At the same time, I don't want to undermine how hard going back is going to be either, because there's a whole spectrum of responses to this thing called RTO, or return to office. There are a lot of people like me and a lot of like my co-workers and my co-executives who can't wait to be back in there, because we miss and we value the brainstorming and the being in the room and all that creativity and energy that comes with being around other people. But then there are other people with just as valid a point of view, including people of children who are still in the unvaccinated group, the under fives and so on, who are far more hesitant about any of this than we are. So while each of us as companies have taken specific stances onto what return to work looks like, I think managing through that is going to require a lot of empathy, a lot of flexibility, a lot of open-mindedness. But at the same time, I hope these tight human relationships we've built will carry us through that.
Those great points. Das, over to you. Radha explained very lucidly about how important it is to have people connecting and being in the same room in creative industries, right? In content creation, but also in advertising. I mean, you guys live with your clients with huddles and, agile meetings to get stuff done. What leadership and corporate challenges has Saatchi had to overcome over the last years?
Yeah, so imagine that being a new person in that mix where you have not met the client. So literally a big part of my initiative through this entire pandemic, which is my entire duration at Saatchi so far, is data literacy first, right? I mean, what can data do and what it cannot do for them? I mean, you will have executives coming and tell you, can you prove this? Because I believe it's true. The fact that data analytics does not work like that, we have to have a way of making it unprovable as well, which is statistical hypothesis testing. How do you explain that to them without going technical on them? Right. Then comes the alignment of multiple stakeholders who have different and sometimes conflicting objectives, where data at the center is the announced new acronym DATC. Data at the center is the way we are going as an advertising agency. Look at everyone with all that data and how they can come with clean ideas on what their segments and clusters want, etc. But then the creative team has an interpretation of it. The media team has an interpretation of it, or they need it in a certain way. And the strategy team is looking at territories and concepts and stories, and they will have another need for it. So the alignment across all of these different teams without having them in the same room has been a sequence of meetings or meetings where all of them are needed, which are impossible to find on their calendars because everything is dictated by Zoom call calendars today. It is no longer walking up the hallway and saying, hey, I just had a quick question for you, which could be answered in 13 seconds, for which I may have to book now a 30-minute or an hour, meeting with all that time wasted and perhaps blocking others from joining them in that. In parallel, we had to do client team alignment often they are slightly different from the internal stakeholder alignment. So those three things of data literacy, data democratization, can we build a dashboard that people can do self-help and look at the results that they could, avail at any point of time, rather than we generating a 100-page report and a data dump and sharing it with them. Those are some of the good things that happen in the process, because people are forced to now look at dashboards because they're not going to get the whole data team around them. But this has been a process and a challenge, and the new way of thinking and communicating and interacting. Plus, to Radha's point, empathy is so critical during these times. I cannot follow up with someone saying, where's my result? Where's my report? Without understanding what that person is going through at the moment. That's the additional dimension that made us, I think, a bit more matured.
I love that. That's great, Das. Thank you so much. So Scott, what leadership and corporate challenges have you had to overcome?
Empathy is a big part of it, understanding and pushing my team to go out and take a walk every once in a while. I never took it for granted that just because I put so many hours and I'm glued to my laptop doesn't mean that others should also be in. Granted that they had no commute time anymore, but I had to instill this sentiment that if you're coming, I expect you to turn the video on, because I don't want that to be lost. It's okay to come with your pajamas, but it's not recommended, So there are a lot of type of a, personal aspect of the leadership that had to be done. But I think just like any other leader, I took advantage of the opportunity to push some of those strategic directives that I wanted to implement. And with COVID and the virtual aspect of working, they were really pushed forward. Let me give you a couple of examples. Just like General Electric, most organizations have a lot of unstructured data, right? So the majority of your data is not just in your databases, it's your documents and what have you. So because of the virtual nature of things, I was able to put up a much better case of having collaboration tools like SharePoint and consolidate these documents and train people the behavior of not attaching a document to email, simplistically put, and using links and co-authoring documents, which went really a long way towards a lot of efficiency. I was able to advocate Scrum calls and agile project management because people understood that, hey, daily Scrum virtual isn't so bad. Oh, huddles, that's a great, coffee breaks virtual, that's not a bad idea. So these types of daily interactions, I didn't want people to start getting isolated. You need to make sure that they feel as if they're still part of that bigger team. I took the opportunity to become an evangelist for data and analytics through a number of, say, information sessions and lunch and learns, which I really advocate that, teaching my business the art of the possible so that they know. I mean, if you put a data scientist in front of a business leader and if he starts talking XGBoost models, you're going to lose them, obviously. But letting them know that, hey, what blockchain can do for you, what is IoT, and what is predictive analytics, what is all of that thing, and then they became the sponsors of those ideas, those innovative ideas that came from a place of comfort for them. Okay. Yeah. Without that, the business would pull away because they might be afraid that they may sound like they don't know what they're talking about. So that was really a good opportunity, one-on-one private sessions also, even with the CEO and C-level folks, right? Just the art of the possible. I think that was a really, real productive, time well spent for me.
That and what you did with self-service business intelligence, bringing data to people, speaking in the language of the business units is really important, right? Not getting data tech speak, but how we can solve their problems. All great replies to everybody. Thank you so much. Back to Radha. So what's changed from last year and where do you see CBS, especially research and analytics, heading now?
It's been a tremendous learning experience. We are very much, I think, still in the learning phase and will continue to be as the world changes in front of us every single day. But we've talked a lot about hybrid from a work style perspective, right? We all figure out how to make work more hybrid. We talked about data sharing through Scott, and we talked about document sharing and co-authoring and so on. So our work styles have become more hybrid. But what I will say is that research and analytics has become a more hybrid, more interesting place to be than it was before the pandemic. Because we learned a lot of things. We learned about new data sources. We learned about data sources we could live without. We learned about how to predict through murkiness, right? So when we simply don't have the data to know exactly what is going to happen. I've always thought of analytics and research as a blend of art and science. The data gets you so far, but ultimately you have to make a leap of faith. I think where we got is even more comfortable with the art of the possible, with predicting the impossible and so on. So we're smarter at harnessing and leveraging all of these data sets, but we're more comfortable saying, hey, I don't really know how this is going to go, or we should really bet on this, because given all our experience and knowledge, that seems the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And it's so hard what you're doing now, because you really couldn't use 2020 data to be a good predictor of 2021. You had to throw all that out. You can't use 2021 data to look at what's going to happen in 2022. And you got to constantly look at this real-time data, which is increasing from, IoT devices everywhere, and from new stuff like the metaverse, and from TikTok and everything else in the content world, right, Radha? So kudos to you and the team for keeping the train on the tracks and moving this forward. Back to DOS on advertising. Speaking of TikTok and the metaverse, your clients must be asking for all kinds of things today. So how have clients adapted to this new normal, and how is Saatchi helping them get their messages out?
Yeah, this is a great question. The clients are excited about, metaverse. I mean, we're looking at numbers here. It's expected that about 58.9 million people in the US will use VR by next year, and about 93.3 million people will use AR at least once a month. So if the consumers are there for whom we are building our advertisements, we gotta be there. And they're spending more time with virtual experiences and content. Their consumption patterns are changing. Gone are the days of a lot of people sitting in front of you as a family sitting in front of a television, being forced linear ads on them, because the same family has 4 people in 4 consumption platforms in 4 different styles. So we have to be there as we target more and more. So we have a very specific, Web 3.0 point of view with a whole machinery working behind it through our, owning it, umbrella Publicis, with Epsilon data, with a lot of other data sources, as well as our deep insights into the consumer research and the minds that we have and what devices they're using. And along with the whole thing with crypto going on and the blockchain going on, all of that is coming together, and it's happening faster, David, because let's say there was no pandemic and we were in our usual ways of going and commuting to the office and coming back, business as usual. This leap would not have happened so fast. And we are riding along with that consumer tide, if you will.
Back to Katherine, how do you think about speed at an organization like Stanley Black & Decker? And I'm assuming it's a little bit more conservative and deliberate with regard to decision making in regards to potentially other industries.
Being fast within a Fortune 250 global matrix 200-year-old manufacturer is not easy, to say the least. And growth efforts are less about kind of long lead times and perfect information and a culture of authority and certainty, which are sort of the heritage of manufacturing. And it's more about test and learn and scale. So what we've focused on is just aligning small teams of people, we call them pods, who are really empowered to make decisions and who are focused kind of on speed of execution. And that's a big kind of mindset shift, that speed is our currency. Going from kind of a department of no to really looking at delivering quickly, and iterating and pivoting to what works is a fundamental kind of mindset shift that affects everything from how we allocate capital to how we organize to how we deliver technology. But I think at this point we have a kind of track record of delivering, so we have a lot of proof points with this model, but it is a fundamental departure sort of from the legacy ways of working.
To Scott, What are you prioritizing now? And how has that changed from last year? What's the priority capital right now for your data and architecture groups?
Just a very quick note. There was a time that CIOs to me were chief infrastructure officers. I think with the advent of cloud, they really got the opportunity to let someone else worry about that and become truly chief information officers. So to your point, Das, earlier, I submit to that. We've gone through the first two phases of our maturity in our landscape. In the very beginning, I need to stabilize the landscape, just like all other chief data officers. You had to, have a sound data strategy and the architecture and deduplicate and governance and all that. And then building those analytics dashboards was enabling the business to really start looking at the data the way that an Excel spreadsheet would not do it justice, taking them from the spreadsheet nation to a more advanced nation. I have built a very modern Azure data science landscape and analytics with all the usual suspects and components of it. And we have a good 10 to 12, 11, I should say, business sponsored, ideated use cases that are waiting for data scientists to pour at it. Machine learning has become a common terminology, whereas in the past, at least 2 years ago, I was smart enough not to mention it because a couple of times I mentioned it, that they thought it was science fiction. Now we've come to a point that said, okay, so if the machine learns enough and gets to a point that can make a decision better or as good as a human being, then that's artificial intelligence. So in my business, this process, let your machine learn it. And when I'm convinced that it has learned enough, you could put that in place and I put that resource somewhere else. This type of a statement coming from the business to me is a very successful. So machine learning and eventually AI is where we are headed. And at the same time, as most of you might have heard, General Electric is splitting into 3 focused companies: aviation, healthcare, and renewables, right? So there's a lot of transformation going with that, and they're all going to have real focused analytics and machine learning and then AI needs going forward. So there's a lot happening and it's constant change and transition.
Especially on AI, and we can expect possibly upcoming regulation around that. I would assume,
Sure.
We want explainability built into all these models, because when regulators and the governors come around, and the internal auditors, you're going to want to be able to explain the provenance all the way through for that data. So interesting and challenging times there. So the final question for you all, I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into the future. And Radha, you are, I believe, also, in addition to your existing role, you're also president of CBS Vision, the company's future function. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that relates to your role as president of research and analytics?
Sure. So if you think about the roles that many of us occupy, right? What we're really doing is staying very, very close to the consumer, to the customer, and bringing that knowledge back to the enterprise. So who better to tell us more about the future and where the world is going than the people who work in data, research, and analytics, because they're talking to real people and looking at real behaviors every single day. So we look at this in many ways, and we're by no means fortune tellers, but it's our job to educate the enterprise on how people are changing, how the demographics are changing, how viewing is changing, what new forms of entertainment or knowledge are being put in, and to bring that early to the C-suite so that we can then collectively make strategic, capital, or other decisions. So the job is to just stay a step ahead of most other people and bring early knowledge in. We do everything from a ton of social media listening to conventional conversations to do that. And that's a whole other session you and I could do, David, someday, about how we listen. But again, people in data, people in analytics, people in research are the people closest to the consumer. And I think all companies would benefit a lot if we allowed those people to share what they're hearing on the ground with the C-suite.
I completely agree. I would love to. That would be a really exciting program.
One of the things that I did not realize that would have so much positive impact, I mean, as data scientists, we tend to think of k-means clustering and segmentation and targeting and positioning and all that good stuff, right? What really turned out to be a fantastic investment for us is to build an AI ML driven knowledge center. And what we are doing is this is a learning, system where I will type in a question like, what happened in the 2017 campaign for this product? It goes to literally that page where that sentence is written and brings up that, and then allows us to, click, up or down, and then also asks a question, how much time did that save you? That we could click on 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And I know that I would have actually wasted hours look for that. And when I shared this with our initial strategy was to get with data, because data is where most of the answers are. We have all our data structured and this system is sitting on top of it and it's learning. And then we went to strategy, and next we have media, and then we will have creative. Yep. But when I shared this with the stakeholders, that look, just ask a question and see how accurately it's bringing up. And by the way, it's learning every time I'm rating it, or every time, just like Netflix, right? If you go rate it up, it will serve you similar titles to you, right? So that has been a fantastic investment for us, and it's paying back a lot because it's saving time, it's giving us insights, actionable ones really quickly. Other than that, of course, we have been investing in and continue to work on media analytics using multi-touch attribution tools, media mix modeling tools, Google Analytics, and several others, so that we can make a decision on how much we would buy from Radha.
And now and now you've got influencers too, and maybe a little bit more on that future outlook from Katherine. Do you consider there's like a new consumer paradigm these days? And how does that impact how companies organize?
Absolutely. I think you were just speaking to the role of influencers or social media. We know that digital and, specifically, our phones are kind of the new front door to the store. We've got, the Amazon effect. So the bar is really high in terms of, what shopping experiences are expected to be. And I think it's exceedingly difficult for companies to structurally, organize to meet these heightened expectations. For Stanley Black & Decker, as an operator, the lines between industries are blurring, manufacturers versus retailers versus, hospitality and entertainment. And the new paradigm means, entirely new ways of working, which I spoke to earlier. They present new levels of risk and uncertainty. We are requiring different capabilities and investments. Just everything evolved. And I don't think there's, kind of a one size fits all, org design wise. But I do think that one thing is clear is that all rules don't apply, and that every company to some extent is having to sort of recalibrate and really embrace, perpetual ambiguity and uncertainty.
Yeah, and continuous improvement, continuous innovation. Just keep getting that feedback and improving. Final question, speed round. What innovation in data or analytics are you now using that you weren't using 18 months ago that has resulted in increased increases in revenues, in innovation, new product delivery, business efficiencies, et cetera? Let's start with Radha.
There are lots of innovations, lots of companies, lots of partners who've done really fabulous things, especially in AI, ML, voice to text, and so on. But here's my call to action. I realized that when we were all away for the past 2 years, a ton of innovation happened in people's bedrooms and basements and every other place that they were inhabiting. And a lot of creativity actually happened. So now that I'm reconnecting with a lot of our partners and vendors and so on, everyone has come a long way. Yes, we have come a long way, but by the way, so has everyone else. So my call to action is to go out and talk to all the people, including people you may have dismissed a few years ago, because you don't know what they cooked up when they were stuck in that basement.
That's for sure. We see a lot of Deca unicorns coming out of basements right now. I mean, it used to take, decade to get to that, Deca unicorn status. Now, unicorns are popping up every 2 or 3 years, especially in data and analytics. It is an exciting time. Fantastic. How about you, Das? What one thing or one technology you're using now that you weren't using 18 months ago that's resulted in improvements?
That AI ML driven knowledge center is one. And then AI ML driven, the other one that we are doing is facial recognition and reaction and emotional reaction to a particular ad so that it allows us to see what elements of that creative message is resonating well and what may not work.
Fantastic. Real-time analysis. Great. How about you, Katherine?
So we've invested in AI for kind of understanding consumer sentiment, and we also have some custom tools that were, born from the increased focus on e-commerce and on digital content. But similar to before, that more important than the technology itself, in my view, is the way that technology is delivered. There is a massive shift, obviously precipitated by the pandemic, where we can, now deliver kind of at light speed and cost effectively, and looking at it not as an end in itself or like a project, but really tied to business outcome. And for me, that's the big value unlock.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katherine. And Scott?
I would actually like to call to action the people of the planet Earth. Because we all talk about machine learning and AI, and you alluded to that earlier, Dave, that the government agencies would like to know how these models are constructed and how they make their decisions, right? There will be a point that general AI will become autonomous and it starts learning deeper. Where is the learning coming from? From the cyber footprint and the data that you and I and everybody else is producing. So I am calling for a kinder and gentler and nicer and more peaceful planet, because AI is coming and it's learning from us. You don't want to wake up the demon. You want it to support us and improve humanity as a result of it.
It's a wonderful thought, a beautiful way to close this out. I have to say, we continue to dispel the myth that data and analytics people are heartless and are robotic. You're all human, and you're sharing that with the world, and you're trying to inject more humanity into the system at every turn. I can't thank you enough. That was a beautiful, beautiful thought. Great session, everyone. Thank you so much. That's a wrap. What a great session. My sincere thanks to each of you for joining us today and for sharing your perspectives with our community. And now we're going to move on to the live Q&A with our audience, which starts right now. All right, great job. Thanks so much to our speakers and to our guests and to all of you for joining us today. A little cloudy and rainy and a little bit of snow here in Long Beach, New York, but we're carrying on. We're going to take some questions from the audience now, so feel free to post your questions in chat. And I see our panelists are joining us. First question for Katherine. Great job, Katherine, on the panel. You started out the whole Team Human content, so it really rolled from there. It's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit, I think on this, a lot of people are talking about change management and talent. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of change management, especially at an organization like Stanley Black & Decker?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. So change, management, which can be, in the form of new business models or, even just new ways of working, is definitely hard and messy and imperfect. And, change management might seem soft, when you're trying to, deliver hard outcomes, but it's probably been the most critical to our success, to date. And I think that, approaches are pretty organizationally and culturally specific. So there's not like one answer that you can, template out. But our approach internally has been, to create this rallying cry, this burning platform, and to really over communicate it. Both internally, we did a roadshow series, and then externally, it's on every earnings call, every conversation with the investment community, where we're enrolling others in the vision and the opportunity and sort of why it matters. And then more practically speaking, we've established like actual ways to streamline decisions, to kind of fend off the antibodies and create more like single-threaded accountability. We're very consensus-driven, very sort of large steering committees. It's sort of the antithesis of sort of how we the legacy culture. So while there's like a lot of complexity and a lot of challenge to doing anything that's net new, we are viewing like technology and analytics as kind of the cost of entry, and the real success being defined as sort of enrollment adoption and the behavior change that creates a sustainable, long-term change.
Great. And similar question to Radha. There's so many, unicorns and deca unicorns and quadruple unicorns coming out, especially in the data and analytics space. What's been harder, staying on top of all these new technologies or change management and corporate culture? And I would say why?
It'd be more helpful if I unmuted. So let me come off mute, and good to see everyone.
Welcome back.
So David, you present this either or, right? Or this binary, is this harder or is that harder? And I would say neither, right? Each of them has challenges and opportunities. Yes, it's incredibly hard to keep on top of every innovation in technology or data or the unicorns, but it's also really exciting and really fun and really stimulating. And there's something really great about that. And change management, of course, as Katherine so eloquently laid out, can be incredibly hard, but that's also why we are in these jobs, right? Because we want to have influence and we want to change the culture and we want to bring people along with us. I want to go back to Team Human and the larger context that our panel was talking about. So each of these paths that you laid out, tech or change management, yes, individually are hard and can have challenges. But let's zoom out. Let's take a look at planet Earth, not as Scott laid out, right? Not just existential threats like global warming, but very specifically the last couple of years. Let's look at COVID and supply chain issues, and now a war, and all the impact that has on people in Ukraine most visibly and painfully today, but also the rest of us who've been living through COVID and are now faced with this intolerable human suffering. So I think what is hard is keeping all that perspective while delivering business results, because that's what we're all paid to do. And that's what ultimately we're all almost energized by, right? So what that takes is a high degree of flexibility and agility and ability to manage change, not just in your team, but really within yourself and within the C-suite. How do we flex and change every single day? Because the world of today is not the world of yesterday, quite literally.
Absolutely. So it's not either or, it's all of the above and more, and we just have to be flexible. We don't have the luxury of being able to choose one or the other. As leaders, we've got to do it all, even the hard stuff. But Das, over to you. Where the CDAO title, for those who are not familiar, Chief Data and Analytics Officer, we love these hybrid titles, grabbing especially those analytics responsibilities at the organization. But not everybody's familiar with them, even CHROs. So what, as a Chief Data and Analytics Officer in the advertising sector, what do you feel is the best organizational structure and reporting line for CDAOs or equivalent?
In general, across the board, I believe CDAOs should be a direct line to the CEO. But the organizational model under that could be different depending on the analytical maturity of the organization. So if it's a very early stage organization where data and analytics are just being understood, and to Radha and Katherine's point, change management becomes a huge issue, it needs to be a centralized team, in my humble opinion, because they will now need to put their heads together and come up with solutions that they will have to kind of evangelize across the organization. As it goes up the maturity curve, and I've worked in both models, a federated model might be helpful where you have each business team with their data teams, but they have regular powwows on sharing their ideas. And in that case, the federated model will actually yield more value by being immersed in that business. So those are the two types of models that I prefer to see, and I've been on both sides.
Yeah, and advertising is unique. You have a lot of agencies at Saatchi all over the country, all over the world.
Correct.
Federated makes a lot of sense there. I want to thank Gary Cao, who's at Akron Children's Hospital, for that question. He's VP of Enterprise Data and Analytics, so I'm sure he's very interested in reporting structures. Scott, next question for you. I got to say, having you back clean up fourth in the slot was a wise move. Probably some of the most heartfelt conversations I've had in a while, and just love it. So as Das just mentioned, and we all know, getting advanced analytics and data talent is really challenging these days.
Right.
And it's a key factor in the success of the data science practice. So at GE Capital, how do you select the right talent and retain them?
Yeah, thanks for that question. First, I want to acknowledge both Katherine and Radha because they were spot on. The old cliche of the only thing constant in life is change is truly correct, and we all have to adapt to that. Just as a chief data and technology officer, CDTO, I have to reinvent myself on a daily basis. So I think an advanced analytics team has to mature to its 2.0 level. During COVID, if we all had some additional time to reflect, right? So what are those key resources that make the most impact in that new realm of work? My observation was that if you look at, for instance, the data scientists that are the key players in any analytics landscape, there are those that intrinsically are very theoretical. They like to go back and train their models and build their models, and I call them the astronomers that like to sit behind a telescope and look at the skies, and they're very good at what they're doing, right? And they're very smart people. Then there are other data scientists that are more prone to getting involved and engaged with the business, understand the business model and the challenges, and be very interactive with the business leaders to make sure that the impact of the data science insight is pushed in the right place. So I call the second category the astronauts, the ones that get up and actually go to the planet, they don't save them. So every organization might need a mix of both, but my recommendation is if you have the opportunity, transition the ones from the first category to the second one by mentoring them and teaching them that interacting with the business not only will eliminate the middle person that we call the business analytics that had to translate the art of the possible of data science and its language for the business. Now you are interacting with them in a much more effective and agile, important way. So I think that goes with any other position, but particularly with data scientists, because they're increasingly playing a more engaged role in every organization for whatever reason that you want to monetize your data for. So that would be my recommendation. And I think it also helps a lot of the data scientists to remain excited and energized and want to stay, and you can retain them because they know that, hey, I'm actually getting a new dimension that I didn't think I had in me, and that's, to me, I've seen people really get invigorated when you do that.
Well, like you said before, the art of the possible, and also challenging people, especially analytics data people, they like to know that they're having an impact at an organization. It's not always about dollars and cents and salaries. So, what a great session. We had another question. I'd like to see if maybe Interpol can reply to this one, because I know IBM has a policy in effect about return to work and return to office. So thanks to Hiroto Ibata, who joins us from Japan. It's 12 hours ahead, so it's 1 a.m. Thanks for staying up. I see you on there. Interpol, Hiroto asks, does IBM or companies have a policy or a plan for getting employees back to work or commuting? Can you give us some insight into what IBM's policy is at this point?
Yeah, so Dave, thanks for the question, and great panel, by the way. So we've got, we're a global company. So we are obviously going to adhere to global laws and regulations. And since this is a very dynamic situation and it changes on a day-to-day basis and differently in different places, our policy is primarily around following the guidance that's being provided by the local authorities at the places that we're operating in. And we kind of pretty much follow that. So it'd be very different from, say, what's happening in in the USA versus what's happening in Europe or versus what's happening in Africa. So we just play it by the guidance that's provided by the local authorities.
Got it. Great. And just for everyone out there, this is our inaugural event with IBM. We've been doing these for 3 years. This is our third year. This is the first event of the year. We've got 5 more planned every other month. There's one coming up in April. I hope you can make it too. And towards the end of the year, we may go live back to face-to-face, which I know a lot of you are excited about. We're certainly excited about it. And maybe, hopefully get some potentially hybrid aspect to that as well. So hopefully we can, maintain the online community and also get back to face-to-face. So I know it's a challenge for all of you out there, continue to plug away. This was such a fantastic hour with a great group of speakers. I feel a lot smarter. I just want to thank all of you today, and especially everyone who's joined us from around the world for our continuing programs. And now back over to IBM's Timothy Humphrey to wrap up. Over to you, Tim.
Hey, thank you, Dave. Hey, look, team, what a great session. I feel like Team Human is my new motto. So look, a big thanks to all the speakers and everyone who joined us today. I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you to register for our next event in the IBM CDO CTO Summit. It'll be the Rise in Chief AI Officers. It's scheduled for Wednesday, April 13th from noon to 1. And until then, I hope everyone stays healthy, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.